to do different things every month. And as many of you know, and I repeat this every month, most of us are members of the ARL. And if you're renewed to the club gets a little $5 perk. If you're thinking about joining the ARL for the first time, the club will get, if you join through the club will get a nice $20 perk. So if you're thinking about joining, please do so through the club. And if you're thinking about renewing, you're not a life member, so you have to pay your dues every year, every couple of years. Please do so through the forms on in Zero Beat and on the website, so you can join in. The club gets a little kickback there. So what goes on at our April meeting?
No one tell.
The new guy knows. So if you haven't built anything or whatever you have built in the last 12 months, you can bring and you can present during show and tell next month. A kit, a package, a project, or whatever. Come and present it. Everybody gets a prize. I think last year we gave a $20 or $25 Home Depot gift cards. So bring whatever it is you're going to show off. Everybody has 10 minutes to present. It's a lot of fun. And that's our April meeting, our annual April meeting. Tonight we have, let's see, Gary, you want to introduce Max?
Yeah. So it's a pleasure to have Max Kendall, who came all the way from Medway with his dad. And Max has gotten into radio from his interest in ballooning and radio signs. And there was a step into ham radio. And he's done a lot of great things since the 3 years that he's been a ham, such as go from technician to extra in a very short period of time. So I think for all of you guys sitting back and saying, I wish I could get that extra ticket, Max should be an inspiration to all of you. So Max, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Testing, testing. All right, so thank you, Gary, for introducing me and having me here. As you know, I'm Max Kendall, W0MXX, and today I'll be presenting to you about how to build your own altitude balloon. And I know this club has started building a altitude balloon, so I'll be kind of guiding you and showing you how to build one. So real quick, I'll show you a quick video on why altitude balloons is such a special hobby. And you'll really see why I've gotten into this hobby and why you might also want to. Are you able to hear that? Hold on one sec. Let me restart real quick and turn on the audio. All right, so from that video, it kind of gives you really the emotional impact of seeing your payload and the stuff that you put up in space and seeing it on a camera as well. And to me, that just really fascinated me. And all the members in our club really love that. So we started getting into high altitude balloons from that. So just a quick introduction of what high altitude balloons are. So they're a cheap way to get a payload to the edge of space. With a rocket, it can cost millions of dollars. With a high-altitude balloon, it only costs like a few hundred. Now, high-altitude balloons have been used by hobbyists often as really an experimentation platform, and it also gets you great footage, as we saw, with the camera, and you can see the balloon bursting and see the outside space, and it's really cool. Now, high-altitude balloons are launched from all around the world, considering government regulations in each country. We'll get to that later. But there's a general rule of thumb that there's always one high-altitude balloon in the air at any given time. So this is a quick gallery of the community that has been built around high-altitude balloons, especially our community, the New England Weather Balloon Society, that we've built around this. So this is a picture of some of the testing that we've done. We sent up a high-altitude balloon repeater on the balloon flight last year. So this is us testing it. This is us giving a presentation on Weather Education Day from CBS in Gillette Stadium. This is a picture from launch day over here, and you can see all of the youth, including me, gathering together, getting the experiments set up, and getting the payload ready. This is the balloon being filled, everybody watching it and helping it, and people really love seeing when the final moment, when the balloon gets started filling up. This is a picture from field day. On field day, we did a big test of our payload because there are a dozen integrated things and many, many, many things can go wrong. So we did integrated tests many times. So some things that are possible to send up on these high-altitude balloons are things like cameras that can give you great footage. You'll want to power things with the battery, obviously. You can also fly up ham radio experiments. Last year, we flew a high-altitude balloon repeater, as well as live video on the 23-centimeter band. You can also send up sensors to get weather data, environmental data, such as temperature, pressure, and humidity. You also want to send up some type of tracking system so that you can track the balloon throughout the flight and get your expensive payload back and retrieve the data. So here's a quick breakdown of each of those things that I just talked about in depth. So for a camera, you'll most likely want to use either something called a Pi cam or an external action camera. Have any of you heard of Raspberry Pi? Yeah. So Pi cameras can easily connect to a Raspberry Pi using the built-in Pi camera slot. And a Raspberry Pi is basically a small computer that people often send up on balloons. And this is an example of one. It's very small, and it's a cheap way to get pretty good footage. We've used external action cameras lately, such as the Akasa Brave 7. We've also tried some GoPros. But the Akasa Brave 7 has really proven itself, and it's substantially cheaper than GoPros. So this is an image of the balloon bursting, and this is a picture of the balloon in flight. So batteries, you want to power things such as action cameras that we just talked about, and the Raspberry Pi, and any other sensors that you want to send up. Now, you may think of putting in like a LiPo battery, lithium polymer, or like an alkaline AA. However, these can actually not perform so well in extreme temperatures. Energizer ultimate lithium batteries to the rescue. They are built with lithium. They're called ultimate lithium batteries, and they are very trusted in the high-altitude balloon community. They can go they're advertised from -40 to 140, although we've tested it, and it can go much lower than that. There's like AA batteries, AAA batteries, CO123s, 9 volts, things like that. Now for a camera, you'll want a battery case for the ultimate lithiums. In this picture, this is the battery case that can hold 3 CO123 batteries, which can provide 3 volts. That's connected to something called a buck boost regulator. This can take the input voltage from the battery and convert it into a usable voltage able to be used for the action camera and any other electronics necessary. Now, in the case of an action camera, you want the output of this regulator connected through USB to the camera. This will provide a stable voltage supply using these Energizer batteries that can last in extreme heat and cold, because it can get down to -50 in cold seasons. Now, if you really wanted to use a lithium ion, they can work, but it's important to note that they can only work well under constant discharge. That is, you always have a load attached to it, like you're always powering something for a while. Now, just to show you the differences, another advantage of the ultimate lithiums versus normal alkaline, these are the capacity. So how many amperes, milliamps can be supplied in an hour? You can see that these 1,000, 2,500, 550 milliamps. So these can only power something for like 2 hours, 2.5. Now, energized ultimate lithiums give a lot more capacity. They can store a lot more energy and survive in extreme temperatures. The only downside is they're a little bit more pricey. They're about $2 per battery for the AA battery. Now, some ham radio experiments that we've done. So I told you about the ham radio repeater, and we just used 2 Baofengs for this, UV80, I believe. We also did a 1.2 gigahertz live video. We used a cloverleaf antenna in the 23 centimeter band, and we had a receiver on the ground, and the payload, the FPV payload it's called, was donated by Mike Koinowski, KD2EAT, which has been one of the first members of our club. Thank you. We've also flown ham radio tracking systems. That's the really only good, reliable tracking system. On our first balloon flight, we flew like a cellular tracker, and it could only track for 13 minutes until it lost signal. In context, these balloon flights can be up to like 4 or 5 hours. We teach a class called Stratoscience, where students can build their own experiments. One of these students was a ham radio operator and wanted to do something radio. So they flew a LoRa experiment testing the 2-way communication from the balloon to the ground. You can see like using a Yagi and a dipole attached to the balloon, and the Yagi was on the ground. It could track the payload throughout the flight. Now, this really shows you how much you can do, because these payloads are flexible. You can fly whatever you want, really, given that you have a tracking system and you have something that doesn't interfere with it. So you all are free to fly whatever ham radio experiments you guys like. Now, for sensors, things to track environmental variables. This is called a BME 280. This is a sensor that's all in one: temperature, pressure, humidity, and from pressure, you can get altitude. Now, if I were for like a first balloon flight, I would aim for an easy to use sensor, such as a UV sensor or a BME 280 that can be easily interfaced with an Arduino. Once you get more acquainted with it and learning how to use Arduino, show of hands, all of you know about Arduino? Okay. So yeah, Arduino is like a small microcontroller that you can program to do whatever you want using C and C++ code. So yeah, you want something easy to interface, but once you get acquainted, the market's endless. There's sensors for anything, given cost. Now, for the flight controller, you can't just hook up these sensors to power and expect to get data. You need to connect them to a controller, such as a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino. So in a lot of our previous sites, we've used Raspberry Pis because they have substantial computing power and they're easy to script with Python programming. Now, on the Raspberry Pi, there's an integrated SD card slot, so we saved sensor data into a CSV, comma-separated value. That's how like Excel and Google Sheets works. We saved it onto the SD card in that format, and along with that, we can save the Pi camera footage, so it's an all-in-one integrated flight controller. If you guys would like, you guys can also do program in C, C++, and program in Arduino Nano. This is, we tried this for the first time in last year's flight, and it worked really well. It was easy to script with. It didn't need a lot of power. Raspberry Pis need a lot of power. We ended up using something like 4 AA's, and that weighed a lot. With an Arduino, you can just use like a few 0, 1, 2, 3s and fly it up. Now, how do we track the flight? Because if we put payload and equipment inside the payload, we want to track it throughout the flight so we know where it is and potentially get live sensor data from the balloon to the ground. So a common and very cheap process is reprogramming radiosondes. I see there's a bunch of radiosondes over there. Thank you, Dave. Now these radio sondes are launched from over 1,000 weather locations around the world twice a day at the exact same time. 0 o'clock UTC and 12 o'clock UTC. That's like 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And there's about 100 upper area stations, which are the weather stations that launch these radio sondes. There's about 100 in the US. Now, inside one of these radio sondes, it's a small styrofoam box like this, with circuitry inside that you can reprogram. Now, radio sondes are launched upon high-altitude balloons. The high-altitude balloon consists of a balloon on the top with lifting gas, such as helium or hydrogen, a parachute to slow the descent, because as you saw in the video, the balloon bursts, and then the payload comes tumbling down at free fall. You don't want that hitting someone, so you have a parachute. And then below that, with radio sondes, there's a radio sonde dangling from a string or a cord. Now, how do we actually track these radio sondes? Hang in there, N1DLM. So you'll most commonly need something like a Raspberry Pi connected to an OTL SDO. And you can connect a 70 centimeter antenna, and that'll do fine. These radio sondes transmit nowadays in the 400 megahertz range, just below 70 centimeter. But a 70 centimeter antenna will work perfectly fine. Now, Radiosonde Auto X is from Project Taurus, based in Adelaide, Australia. They've made a lot of the high-altitude ballooning infrastructure. And you can node AutoX onto a Raspberry Pi. Assuming that is internet, it will automatically scan the frequency spectrum, find the radio sonde signal, decode it, and send it to a website called SonTub. Now, for radio sonde chasing, this is often paired with a software called Chase Mapper. Now, this connects using something like UDP, but it's all internal on the Raspberry Pi. You can program both AutoX and Chase Mapper onto the Raspberry Pi, and it connects to the AutoX automatically, and it imports the data and plots it on an easy-to-use map. It shows you the time until landing, a bunch of the data. You can change it to terrain view. It shows you some basic data about the radio sonde. All of this is free, except for the actual Raspberry Pi. So, Raspberry Pi with AutoX and OTL SDO and a 70 centimeter antenna will get you radio sonde tracking in no time. Now, to actually reprogram these radio sondes, these RS-41s are notoriously hard to open. You'll need pliers, tweezers, something that can open this little plastic tab on the front. After my talk, if you guys want to know the details, I can. But you'll need an opened RS-41, which are these are the easiest to reprogram. You can optionally have a DFM-17. That's another model of radio sonde that's commonly launched over here in Massachusetts. You'll need something called an ST-Link. This connects to the internal microcontroller on the radio sonde and can connect it to USB so that you can reprogram it from a laptop. Now, Project Taurus has also made a software called RS-41NG, or with the help of Project Taurus, someone has made RS-41NG. Now, this firmware is loaded on a Linux machine. If you don't have a Linux machine, you can use something called WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. So you can use a Windows laptop and install that. You can also use a Raspberry Pi or just a Linux laptop. Of course, you also need the RS-41NG or RS-41HGP. They're both similar, and they're both open source and free. Now, radio sondes can be programmed to transmit either APRS, Morse code, PIP, or Horus binary, or any combination of those. For context, PIP is a very crude system. It transmits like a bleep every couple minutes, and that allows you to use direction finding to aim a beam antenna around and triangulate the position. Now, Horus binary, I really loved because we started using it a lot throughout these past couple flights, mainly because it's very reliable. APRS is common courtesy to only transmit less than once a minute, or in increments of once a minute, so that you don't get angry phone calls from people wanting to use the band. For Horus binary, it runs on 4FSK, 4-frequency shift keying, separates the characters into 4 different frequencies or tones. In 4FSK or horse binary, can be reprogrammed or programmed to transmit down to once every 4 seconds. This allows you to get quick positions throughout the fight and an accurate burst altitude, because a lot of people really love knowing their burst altitude, how high they got. It's also a very weak signal protocol. You don't need a lot of power to use it. There's a bunch of error correction and redundancy in it. So it can be decoded as a weak signal. Now you can use a radio sonde. However, in these past couple of months, I've been developing something called Tiny 4FSK. It's basically specializes in 4FSK. There's a PCB for it, and it just came, and I'll show you the pictures of the PCBs that just arrived at my friend's house. And it basically runs on a microcontroller and gets GPS data and converts it into a horse binary and sends it out, and it's also open source. Here's the PCBs. I have not soldered them yet, obviously. This just came at my friend's house because he also ordered a bunch of PCBs. So yeah, I'm excited to start testing this because it's definitely very much a work in progress. Look in here. Okay. So in order to decode the horse binary positions from either radio sondes or in the future Tiny 4FSK, you'll need a laptop, a base station laptop on the ground. For the chase car, you'll be tracking it throughout the fight. So you obviously need a transmitting radio sonde or transmitting Tiny 4FSK from the balloon. You'll need a laptop on the ground loaded with some type of SDO program, ideally connected to an OTL SDO. I like HDSDO because it's very intuitive and easy to use, connecting to an OTL SDO. And then using a virtual audio cable, it can connect HDSDO to a web or a software called Horse GUI, which is able to be installed onto any operating system. Now, assuming that your laptop has internet, you'll want like a phone hotspot or like a phone tether. This can upload to a website called amateur.sondhub.org. Just like Sondhub, it can make predictions throughout the fight and live update the projected landing site after the burst. Now, how to actually prepare for a launch. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the FAA regulations. Now, you'll want to read through these so that you get a good feeling of really the safety precautions for launching these. Technically, if you keep your payload below 12 kilograms, you keep each separated payload weight below 6 pounds. Basically, what that means is if you have multiple payloads in the same payload train, you want each one to be below 6 pounds. If you have like small dense payloads, such as this, you want to keep them below 4 pounds. And payload lines have to be breakable with 50 pounds of force. In case it gets sucked into a jet engine, it can easily rip and not hurt anyone on the plane. Now, if you're below these, you don't really have to follow Part 101 in subchapter F, Chapter 1, Title 14. Yes, they have a lot of rules. If you abide by these rule of thumb, and I can share this slideshow with you so that you get this information. If you meet that, then you don't really have to follow Part 101. But I would use it for general safety precaution and really hit as much of the rules as you can, but you don't need to. Now for safety, once again, common courtesy. I would highly suggest doing these common courtesy things. Submit a notice to airmen so that planes can stay clear of the projected flight path. So I call them generally 24 hours before at the salt line. And you need to give them a bunch of information using a template. They'll ask for like your plan, time of launch, where you'll be launching from, the nearest airport, things like that. You'll also want to use a parachute. that keeps the descent rate or how fast it's falling vertically. That will slow it down to less than 20 feet per second, because that's generally a good rule of thumb. Use a bright colored payload, because if it's in a tree or if it's falling in front of a car, you want it to be easily seen. So something like a big white box or like bright duct tape, things like that will always be good. You want to launch on clear days so that people, like planes, can see in front of them. And you should also check out this website called SkyVector. This is a map of like all the airspace boundaries. You want to steer clear of like the heavy black circles or heavy solid circles. And this will show you like things like airports, things to stay clear of. Like these circles, solid circles. You want to stay clear of those throughout the flight path. Once again, I'll share the slideshow with you for information. Why does this keep going as slideshow mode? Okay, now you'll always want to weigh your payload beforehand. If you make any changes to the payload, you want to weigh it using a scale. This will give you a good idea of how heavy your payload will be, and that will let you make predictions and make calculations on how much gas to put in. And you'll also want to give that on the NOTAM hotline. You can also weigh each individual component shown here. This is a student project which launched a glider. It was planning to be a steering glider that flew from the balloon into the ground with autonomous navigation. That's this year. You want to weigh each component and you can add them, estimate it, but also at the end when it's all integrated, that'll account for like duct tape, hot glue, things like that. Now for parachute and balloon, you'll want to, for the balloons, you'll want to use Rocketman. That's really the good company that you'll want to choose from. There's a sizing guide on their website it shows you like if you have this payload weight, it'll slow your payload down to less than 20 feet per second. So you'll want to choose the proper parachute accordingly. For balloons, they're always measured in how heavy they are. We've used 2,000 gram balloons. That's the highest we've gone. You'll want to use Kmart balloons. That's in the US, so quick shipping. And you can get the correct balloon size using the product information for each balloon. Now for the gas, you want either helium or hydrogen. Now, nowadays, helium is not very available. It can cost it can cost a lot. Sometimes it's not even available for non-essential infrastructure, as they told us on the phone. But helium is usually the go-to because it's safe, and you can just put it in the car and go on with it. With hydrogen, it's very, very cheap. You can get a lot for not a lot of money. It's #1 on the periodic table, so it's very buoyant. However, of course, all good things come to an end because it's very hard to store. It's very flammable and you want to keep it in like a shed outdoors, and it's this long process. The gas can come from like air gas or like local welding suppliers. Now you'll want to input this into the SONTIP calculator. In here, you can put in the payload mass and which balloon you're using. You would find this on the Kmart website. You would find this on a scale. Then you can either type in your targeted burst altitude or in meters or how high it'll go, or you can type in the target ascent rate. So generally a good rule of thumb is like 5 meters per second. And then in here, in the constants advanced, you want to select your gas and change it to hydrogen. And then here it'll give you all your data. This is very important over here, and this is very important, and I'll tell you why later. Okay. Now, in order to store this gas, because you may want to get this gas beforehand to give you flexibility on the launch date. Now, you want to store it in like a long term in like a shed outdoors. Number one, you cannot store it near sparks because once again, very flammable. You want to, and while you're transporting it from your like preparation site to the launch site, which can be very far away, up to refad launches like 3 hours away. Yeah, you want to transport in like either like a pickup truck or a trailer. At our ham radio club, we have a trailer that we can use, and we've been transporting it in there. This is a first revision. We just had this one ratchet strap that went around the hydrogen. There's this wooden beam below that kept it in place. We ended up using 3 ratchet straps, one up here, there, and there. That it kept that rock solid. We had 2 hydrogen cylinders. If you're using helium, you can do anything. You can put in the back of the car. However, you'll probably want good airflow because if it gets hot, it can do bad things. So you'll want to like open the windows, and if you're driving down a highway, that can get loud. So our club symbol used to be earmuffs because we always used to use hydrogen and we'd open the windows. Now, for an actual launch, you'll need some more supplies. For example, kite string, 50-pound brake force, remember FAA? This will get you the exact amount of braking force needed that adheres to FAA regulations. Now, when you're doing tie downs, and I'll tell you what those are in a sec, if you're like tying it down to the turf and keeping it in place, you want to use some heavy duty string. Last year on a big flight, we had a 2,000 gram balloon filled with hydrogen, and yet we used a 50-pound kite string, and that was breaking left and right, and we could not keep it in place for more than 10 minutes. So you want to use this for the actual payload string. You want to use this for the tie downs, which you'll cut later. And then you'll want some stakes to keep the tarp and the balloon on the ground. You'll also want a balloon fill regulator. You can't just connect it to the hydrogen cylinder and expect it to get good airflow safely. So you need something called a regulator, which is this, that connects through a hose to the balloon adapter. You'll want to measure the balloon neck diameter on the K-mount website and get a good adapter accordingly. Now the exact adapter is called CGA 580 or 350. 580 is for helium and 350 is for hydrogen. But I'd recommend getting the Rocket Man pre-made weather balloon inflator. Rocket Man, if you remember, is a parachute company. They also make inflators, and people in the club have said good things about it. So that's what we're recommending. However, this tube, you want it pretty long, 50 to 100 feet, so you can get from the truck or trailer to the launch site and give you flexibility for parking. You'll also want electrical tape, thick electrical tape that will allow you to securely tie the string around the balloon filled tube. You'll want a tarp because the balloon, the latex balloon, if you have any latex allergies, I'd advise staying away from the balloon. But the tarp will keep the balloon off of the ground, and if it touches the ground, it can cause imperfections, and at high altitudes, when it's stretched out very far, can drastically reduce the burst altitude. You'll also want scissors for cutting the tape and string. We've also been starting to use it. It's called an arc lighter. You hold down a button and a little arc comes out that can burn string, rather melt string. And that keeps the balloon safe, but can cut the string well. Now, I do not want to debate about this, but it's been debated for years. Nitrile gloves can keep the finger oils and hand oils off of the balloon, causing no imperfections, or very little imperfections, and getting a higher burst altitude. And then you'll want to keep all this in like a big duffel bag. We usually use 3 big duffel bags that we have to carry from a house into a car and then back to the launch site to keep everything safe and together. Now, you'll want a center of operations because you want to get there hours early. So this was one of our fights that we helped someone with called Robert Stan. He threw a balloon with the dice. You'll want to have like a canopy to keep shade because you'll be launching in summer. Long extension cords to get power because often laptops and base station supplies, cameras need power. And also, I bring some snacks and water so that you can keep yourself going. I apologize for no image here. But for the chase station in the car, you'll want a laptop, an RTL SDO, like this. We can get it out like this. It's an RTL SDO, software defined radio. You want a mag mount antenna to clip onto the top of your car, and that connects the chase station RTL SDO. And then you'll want a recovery bag with all of the weather ballooning essentials, with all the recovery gear for getting it out of a tree, the inevitable tree. If you've hunted radiosondes, they've almost always landed in trees. So now to keep thinking to the minimum, because it's very stressful and you want to get things going quick, no thinking needed. You'll want to organize lists and checklists. So for example, on the night before the launch, it's often very hectic and you'll want to collect everything together. On our flight, we had like our big dining room table filled with ballooning stuff. And we like collected it beforehand and went through our supplies checklist. If there's multiple people handling the supplies, like supplies for each, make a separate tab in Google Sheets or Excel for each person. So you can just make sure you get every single thing, including screwdrivers, tape, lighter, things like that. Now for the launch checklist, when we actually launch, this is even more stressful. So you want to literally detail every single step that could possibly be done. Turn on glider, turn on helicopter, check the tracking stations, click the off button. You want to keep things very specific so that you can just go ahead, check things off, and keep it nice and calm. So picking a launch day. As I said before, you want a clear sunny day, so check your weather app. You can run predictions, so you can set like the launch site, set it with the map. For example, like southwest. We've usually launched from the southwest in like Connecticut. You want to keep watching the weather report. You want to start running predictions, and I'll show you how to run predictions in a second. And you'll be changing the launch date a lot, and then you'll find one good day, like, oh, that's a good day. It's mostly sunny. The prediction looks good. I'm going to call in my NOTAM and 24 hours before the launch and get everything set up. I'm just going to quickly show you the prediction. It's called predict.sondhub.org. Now from here, this shows a map. And if we were, for example, launching in Adelaide, Australia, which you won't, so you'll want to click Set with Map, and then click your launch location. This is for example only. Then you can go through, use the burst calculator, put in your constants, change it to hydrogen, always change it to hydrogen. Use values, run prediction. It'll give you a predicted flight path throughout the flight. Now, the closer you do this prediction towards the launch, the better the prediction will be. So far out, if you do the predictions far out, then it'll be less accurate. But if you do them sooner, like closer to the launch day, then it'll be very accurate. Now for the actual launch day, get there early. If you think it'll take you 3 hours to set up, get there 5 hours early. You want to aim for like an afternoon launch that gives more breathing room, like 12 to 1. We've launched usually at 12. First balloon launch was at like 3 or something because we ran out of helium. Your first balloon launch will not go as planned, but you can learn off our mistakes. Learn the easy way. That's always better. So anyone who's planning on attending the launch, bringing essential equipment, check with everyone on the launch day. And then once you get there, just go mindlessly off the checklist, or with a mind, check the checklist. Now, quick instructions on how to actually fill the balloon. So in the field, you'll be launching from a field, not a forest, please. Get to the field, lay out the chart, put in the stakes to keep it in place. We've had on one of our launches last year, as soon as we got there, it was super windy and we had to like quickly get the stakes in, like put weights on while we were putting the stakes in. But then when we launched it, the wind kind of eased down. So lay out the tarp. Now, from the fill tube, or the fill cylinder, you want that either in like the pickup truck or the trailer, or don't put it in like the crowd because that can be dangerous. Connect the fill tube with the regulator from the cylinder, and then connect that to the balloon. Now, before you connect it to the balloon, you'll want to slide 6 loops onto the fill tube. Four for stakes, and that'll keep the balloon rock solid. 1 for the counterweight, which I'll talk about next slide. And then 1 for the payload line that goes throughout the actual payload train. Now for the counterweight, this makes sure that you fill the balloon just enough. You'll want to get just enough so that you get the predicted flight path and you get the right burst altitude. So to do the math, it's simple. You take the neck lift, and then since the counterweight string is connected to the fill tube, you'll want to weigh the fill tube adapter and then subtract that from the neck lift. So neck lift minus fill adapter weight. You can use things like water bottles or like rocks and put it in a bag, and then weigh that bag and make sure it's this value up here. Now when the balloon, once you fill the balloon and the counterweight starts getting off the ground comfortably, like it's staying up there a little bit and then falls back down, that's generally the perfect amount and you're ready. Now, don't just release it off with the counterweight. Counterweight is not your payload, I would hope. So to actually fill the balloon and close it, you attach the fill tube to the balloon with electrical tape. Put a lot of electrical tape in, because on one of our flights, the balloon fill tube popped off. We heard a loud bang, and then I quickly grabbed the balloon and put it back down, and then we secured it well with electrical tape. So don't make the same mistake. Excuse me. Now, instead of a counterweight, you can use a pole scale. But of course, if the balloon is going it sideways and your pole scale is here, like a luggage scale, that'll also add like the sideways acceleration. Just use a counterweight. Now you'll secure the balloon diameter onto the fill tube. And then once you fill it, you bend over the nozzle. And then as you put your strings through, make sure all 6 of your loops are around the balloon neck. Instead of just 1, you want 6. Tarp, counterweight, and payload train. Make sure, I'll say this again, 3rd time, make sure they're all on the nozzle. Now, once you bend it over, you wrap as much electrical tape as you can on there. Optionally, you can add a zip tie, but be careful with that because the pointy end, when you clip it off, can hurt the balloon. There's also some video web tutorials that show pictures on step-by-step on how to fill it if you're lost. Now, once you actually get everything tied on and the balloon is lifting the counterweight, moment of truth, cut off the counterweight, And as you're starting the payload, turning on the electronics, sealing it, finalizing stickers, things like that, make sure the balloon is tied down and that make sure one person is always watching the string so that it's not snapping, because that could lead the balloon off into the abyss without a payload, and that's a waste of a balloon. So test the tracking systems 3 times. Start your mobile chase station, and that's ready to chase once you release it. Get cameras ready, do a speech, do whatever pre-launch event you want. You want like a phone hotspot that gives you Wi-Fi for the chase station. Keep it near the tracking station, at the base station. Moment of truth, 3, 2, 1, release. Now, actually recovering it. To recover it, you'll need to follow it. So you can use tracker.sondhub.org or rather amateur.sondhub.org to get the projected landing site, And now the landing site will continuously change, especially before the burst, because the amount of balloon that comes down with it is unknown. Also, take your time and try to imagine every single thing that you could possibly miss on the launch checklist. A few years ago, my dad was convinced that the payload had burst open, all the electronics were falling, and everything failed, and we found it perfectly that day. But assume the worst. Now, once you get the final transmission, go to it. Go to the final transmission. Now, once you get there, you'll get another transmission. Use that as your final position. That's where it is. Hopefully it's not in a pond. It will be in a tree. So check out with your recovery bag to the tree and get going. It will land in a tree. And if it lands in a field, it will land in a tree next time. So once you get to the tree, it'll take probably a few hours, may go on into the next day. But at least it'll take like 1 or 2 hours. You'll want to talk to the landowner, because if some person looks bewildered looking at you from the house, you're shooting slingshots, that'll be concerning, and they may call the police. So always ask permission from the landowner. You can use things like hunting apps. There's like hunting apps that can show the property boundaries. A good one is called OnX Hunt, and that shows like the property boundaries, the phone numbers of people, things like that. If and once you get permission, get your recovery bag with things like a slingshot to aim with a nut, get it over the tree branch and get it down. You can use Hojo, Mike Kronowski, KD2EAT, brought his potato cannon one time, and he shot little pieces of potatoes over, not potatoes. He shot like little nuts over, tried to get it, but like the valve broke. They went to the store. So yeah, you might want a throw bag with like an Ober slingshot, little throw bag so you can just throw or like spin and throw. You want a flashlight because if you're there in the night, you want to see the payload. Paracord, especially if you have a slingshot. You'll start with like fishing line that can break if you're like pulling on it. So you'll want to tie on paracord as soon as you get a good shot and then pull it down. On one of our flights, my grandfather went there and he randomly had a tire iron in his truck. So we couldn't get it down no matter how much we tried. Eventually he got the tire iron and we used it as a grappling hook to get it down. And after many, many tries, we eventually like hit it down and pulled it down and all was good. Be prepared though. Bring some hooks, little hooks so you can tie onto the string. Now, if you spend hours, days, weeks, and you can't get it down, call an Obis. They'll gladly get it down for you. For tracking. Oh yeah, OnX Hunt, ONX Hunt.
Also a Massachusetts interactive property map online for free.
Yeah, Mascus, although it is very slow and takes a lot of bandwidth. So like on the run, you'll probably want to use that. So as I mentioned, there's like a big community around this. We're part of the New England Weather Balloon Society. We'd love to get you to take a business code over here. The business codes are right over here. On the back, there's a QR code for you to join our Discord server. If you have any questions, you can ask in the Discord server because there are many experts on that Discord server that will gladly help you. There's people that run the Project Taurus team. There's people, the person that made Earth 41NG is on there, and they're gladly help you. So yeah, grab a business code and join the server if you have any questions or to chat. We'll always be there. And that concludes my presentation. And does anyone have any questions?
Try get it out of water.
Okay, so the question was, how many times has there been a water landing? Not yet. There's always been a tree landing. Although with one of our radiosondes that we went and got, it landed in a big icy pond. And like we thought it was like iced over, no hope. And then one of our students got waders and waded through the pond, got the radiosonde, went back. Oh, kayak. He got kayaked out there, and then got the radiosonde from there. Does that answer your question? So one time.
My other question is, are they typically going to the west, or do you sometimes have them go up? Well, you guys are closer to the shore coastline. Do they go out that way sometimes too? And
Okay, yeah, so the question was like, what's like the general flight path? So like generally in the summer, it'll generally be from like northwest to southwest to northeast. Like we usually launch in like northern Connecticut, and that lands. One time it landed 5 minutes away from our house. Last year it landed like half an hour away from our house. But it can vary depending on the day. Sometimes it'll blow backwards. We saw a prediction and it flew backwards in that prediction. We're not launched then. But yeah, Sundays can be sporadic, but generally southwest to northeast.
You hunted for it out here in Western Mass?
So the question was, have I hunted a balloon down here in Western Mass? No, the closest we've gotten is launching from Western Mass. But the closest that's landed to Western Mass is 5 minutes away from our house. Yes.
Is there a concern in using hydrogen that the static discharge, like when you're filling the balloon, could be a problem? And if so, what do you do to help prevent that?
Yeah, so the question was like when like the static discharge charging the balloon and like the flammable hydrogen. So yeah, that's a very good question, and I've never experienced that. However, I believe that like the nitrile gloves may protect that from happening. Although I haven't seen any cases of static lighting it on fire.
You can also just add to that, like the National Weather Service now uses almost all hydrogen. And they have a very simple build process.
Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned early on in your talk about the, in your talk actually about different types of payloads. Obviously, those are at different weights. And I'm curious as to how you account for that differential. Is it the size of the balloon? Is it the amount of hydrogen? Is it both?
So yeah, the question was like between each payload that you use, like what changes if you change the mass? So if the mass increases, you'll generally want a larger balloon and more gas. They'll be able to lift it better and get you to higher altitudes, or rather the same altitude, but with more gas. Try to keep it light. If there's like, you need this to be a separate board, keep it separate and add a little more weight, maybe another battery. But don't use like 7 different Raspberry Pis with like 60 batteries. That's unnecessary. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
You might want to open up the K1 website and show, they have a helpful guide.
Yeah. While I'm doing that, yep.
Yeah, in your instrument package that you've flown,
Have you had an altimeter? And if yes, how high has your draft gone?
Okay, yeah, good idea. The question was, have I found an altimeter in any of my fights? So yeah, we always have tracking systems with GPS, and we've always like exported that flight path into Google Earth, and we can see interactively like how high it went. The highest that we've gotten is, I believe, 103,000 feet. And that was about 3 years ago, I believe. Yeah, so we're on the website. Use all the balloons that you can get. I'll just use the balloon that we use as an example. You can go to spec sheet. From there, I can tell you like how heavy the balloon is, like how wide the balloon gets, like at the before you release it, diameter release.
Previous page, the guidance.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, yeah. So here it just gives you a short blurb. It's like for very heavy payloads, can reach pretty high. The reason why our balloon wasn't the highest, it only got to 70,000 feet, was because we misread the counterweight. We forgot to account an extra part, and it didn't go high enough. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
How much have you invested?
Like for each launch?
To your hobby?
Okay, so the question was, like how much investing goes into this? I think that's a good question for my dad.
Yeah, I would say it depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to do a pretty big payload with multiple cameras and all this custom hardware, big balloon, lots of gas, probably expecting between $500 to $1,000 all together for the project. If it's a very small payload, like a radio sonde and a small balloon, you could get out of it just a couple $100 investment. We've been lucky enough to work through Noobs for the last couple of years and get donations that have been paying for all of our flight stuff.
All right, does that answer your question?
Yep.
All right, are there any more questions there?
What's the farthest you've had to travel to track your balloon payload down?
Okay, good question. The question was, how far have I had to travel? So I can definitely tell you the least I had to travel. That's the time I landed 5 minutes away from my house. I believe the most I've traveled was last year's flight, is that right? They've all been fairly similar. On the last year's flight, we intentionally made it fly over New England SciTech, which is a ham radio club. There we had like a base station with like a rotator that received the live video and receiver or repeater net working and stuff like that, net control. So I think that's the furthest, although they're all fairly similar in the summer.
Yeah, he said in the summer they're all similar. So if you
Yeah, it can change throughout each season.
Yeah, the reason we try to launch in summer, main reasons, is because the wind patterns. When you get that high altitude crosswind that blows back to the west, you end up with these zigzag paths that don't end up going as far. If you try to launch now and you run a prediction, it'll go all the way across Massachusetts.
Yeah, so you'll want a shorter flight path. Dave?
When you reprogram one of the radio sondes to to repurpose it, you have to worry about the frequency that it transmits on in order to stay legal.
So yeah, good question. The question was, if you reprogram a radio sonde, is there a concern about the frequency? So in OS41NG, I don't know if I'll be able to quickly bring it up, but I'll try. There is, you can control the frequency. Generally, they're programmed in the 70 centimeter band, and that kind of lets you, that gives, and you'll want 70 centimeter because that gives you the ability to reuse the same antenna. Let me just quickly get into here. So this is a quick demo on reprogramming radio sounds. You can define whether it's an RS-41 or DFM-17. You can set your call sign, some general stuff, GPS, external sensors. You can connect external sensors. Programming the modulation, CW, PIP, APO source. Parameters for that. Frequency. So yeah, this is in hertz. This is like the default, and we've been using that 432.5. But yeah, you can like control which frequency you want it to use, and this gives you a lot of control over what you want, like APRS. Reason why it says science fair on there is because I had a demo for the science fair at my school. Course binary settings. Yeah, so this is just a big file used with RS-41NG. And then from there you can like compile the file and upload it using OpenOCD, which is the software used to get it onto using the ST and get it onto the radio sound.
You have another balloon launch scheduled to come in June, July. Do you know when you're doing that yet?
Yeah. The question was, when's my next launch? So we are definitely planning, assuming everything goes to plan, we're planning to do at least one flight this year, in like June, July, yeah. Last year we ended up doing 4. The first one was a Wild West Dan one that I told you about with the dice. Like it was a D40 that was like a charity event. Then we had the main HabGab flight. Some of you may have heard of it, HabGab. That was like the how to balloon repeater and live video, trying to integrate too many things in one payload. Then some of the student experiments failed on that, like weren't started correctly. So we flew a sequel to the student flight called Stratoscience B. And then we did a tethered flight after that, again, to test those 2 experiments that failed, testing to make sure that they work well. Are there any more questions?
Have you ever flown any of the pico balloons that go round?
That's a good question. The question was, have I flown a pico balloon? So for quick context, a pico balloon is a small balloon. You can use like party helium. It's like a small minor balloon. You can get it from party stores. And they float around the world, circumnavigate. You may have heard the US Air Force shot down one of them from a hobbyist, K9YO. That may ring a bell. We have, our club has not flown a pico balloon yet. However, one of our members, Eric, KC1OAV, has been working on flying the U4B tracker from QRP Labs. It's a few $100. And that's kind of been put to a pause because he got a little bit sick. But it's starting to ramp up again. So we're planning on launching a pico balloon either this year at very minimum or next year or the year after. Yep.
If not you, but you know people who had it go too far and end up in the ocean.
Yeah. So the question was like, do I know anyone that like got into the ocean or like flew it very far? I've heard of a story that one was launched from Massachusetts and landed in Maine. One of our members, Joe WJ2B, flew one of his flights and it was kind of a floater. There's kind of like a small group in our Discord server that launches floaters, they're called. So they've been trying to get to Europe from launching in Massachusetts and Long Island. They've gone very close. One of the members of their first balloon flight and it landed in the ocean halfway there. So yeah, they're well on the way. Any more questions? Yep.
How old were you when you started this?
So the question was, how old was I when I started doing this? I believe it was either 2018 or 2019. I was like 9 years old, I believe. I had no idea what I was doing for a cellular tracker. use party store helium. By the way, if you're using helium, don't get it from a party store because it's only 80% helium. And it's very hard to get the calculations correct for that. We made that mistake. Although if you're doing like a pico or a photo with a very, very light payload, you may be able to get away with party store helium. But I wouldn't recommend it.
Any other questions?
Final call.
No, thank you very much. Next.
Thank you. Sorry, to scan off.
Great job.
Thank you.
So afterwards, if anyone wants to come up and go through our recovery.
I got my charger.
You can hang on.
Thanks. You guys can check out.
Right. Two things before we close down the meeting, and we'll let you loose, and you can come up and see Max's stuff and Dave and Bob's collection of radio. Paul, what's the latest on the QSO cards, the outgoing cards?
The next thing will go out, on or about April 15th. Get past the, you know, the major concepts of in March, so it's time to get them ready.
Yeah, for those that don't know, that, the club does outgoing QSO, organization that gets sent to the bureau, and the club picks up the fees, a member perk. You have to be a member of the club, you have to be a member of the ARL to make use of it. Get your DX cards that are outgoing to Paul, and he'll organize them and give them to the league. Big thanks to Smitty for coffee and donuts tonight. Thank you very much. We appreciate that, or everybody appreciates it. Let's see here. Do we have any other announcements? We got the 10-meter net on Monday nights at 7 p.m. on 28,375. Dave, wherever Dave went, he joined us this past Monday. I'll be net control again this Monday because Gary can't make it. And we have a good time. It's we have a subject of the night and conversation, and we haven't done any DX check-in for a while. It's times I've checked in, but I did work a station out in Midwest somewhere running POTA right before the net and stuff. Question?
I just got a comment. Just would like to make one mention, if you haven't heard already, whether it's a zero beat or whatever, that as of June, Larry will be stepping down as club president. And I, for one, would just like to thank him for being a fearless leader for the past several years, going back before I rejoined the club. And just to thank him for everything that he's done us, between the share the knowledge, the Big E, and then anything and everything that the club has gone through.
I second that. Been a fun run. Been on board for a little over 20 years. So let's see here. So Ken is our zero beat editor. If you haven't noticed, zero beats are 28 to 32 pages long. They're one of the largest and best newsletters in New England. We're going to be entering it in the newsletter competition at the Ham Expo come August. And we're hoping for good results. But if you don't read your zero beat, you should. There's lots of really, really good information in there. Changes every month. It may, you know, some aspects of it may look the same, but you need to look closely because it all changes. Let's see here. So any other comments or anything? We'll see you at the Mount Tom Fleet tomorrow. I think doors open at 8:30 for the public. And thanks again to Max and his dad for coming out from Eastern Mass. We appreciate it, and feel free to come up and ask them questions. And thanks for coming out tonight. Everybody drive safe. Oh, and big thank you to Marvin for stepping forth. Sorry, I forgot.
No. I was saying, isn't the northeast New England Ham Fest having 2 weeks?
No, the Northeast Ham Expo is in August, the 23rd to the
I thought they
20th.
had one like April or March. Like
You're talking about Near Fest.
Near Fest.
That's the end of April.
There was a date, it's
Yeah, they moved it earlier.
Thursday, Friday now.
You go to near-fest.com.
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason I thought it was like late March.
I know we went 2 years ago and we froze. It was really cold. So bundle up. And, let's see here. What else? Anything else going on? I think that's it. Everybody drive safe, have a good time, and, just be lucky we don't live out in Syracuse way. My friend sent me a picture of, he had over 14 inches of snow yesterday, so.
Wow.
Some warm weather, and everybody have a great evening. Thank you for coming out. Get your projects ready for next month.